I told Mark he never actually satisfied me because I wanted to watch his face collapse. That part, at least, worked exactly as intended. Everyone thinks I'm just some brutally honest woman who finally found her voice, but the truth is I weaponized my dissatisfaction before he could discover my actual betrayal. I knew about the text to his ex for 6 days. 6 days of scrolling through screenshots of their increasingly explicit conversations while he slept beside me, one arm thrown across my waist like I needed protection. What nobody understands is that I couldn't stomach being the victim. Not again. My entire life had been a series of men who left me diminished, and I swore the next one wouldn't get to claim that power. So I did what any self-respecting woman with a broken moral compass would do. I struck first, publicly, and with enough force that nobody would bother asking if he'd hurt me first. The real ugliness, the part that keeps me awake at 3 in the morning, is that my confession about faking every orgasm for 3 years was the least damning thing I could admit. The full story involves my sister's husband, a burner phone I bought specifically to entrap Mark, and a decision I made while wearing the dress he bought me for our anniversary. I'll explain how I got here, but you need to understand. By the time I told him about settling sexually, I'd already done worse things than most people could imagine in a relationship. I just needed him to leave thinking he was the problem. The trouble started 6 months earlier, when I found Mark's old laptop stuffed in the back of our closet. He'd told me he'd recycled it 2 years ago when we moved in together. I'd been purging our storage unit, trying to create space I didn't actually need, just to feel productive while avoiding a work deadline. The laptop still held a charge, and when I booted it up, his Facebook Messenger autologged into an account I didn't recognize. He'd been using the name Marcus West, a weirdly generic pseudonym, and the most recent conversation was with a woman named Emma B. Emma B. was Emma Brennan, his college girlfriend, the one he'd sworn he'd blocked completely after their messy 2017 breakup. The messages were 2 years old, from before we'd met, but reading them felt like swallowing glass. They'd had this entire secret relationship playing out in parallel to his public one with me, complete with explicit photos and plans to meet in hotel rooms. I took photos of the screen with my phone, my hands shaking so hard that half the images came out blurry. Then I closed the laptop and put it exactly where I'd found it. Mark came home that night with Thai food and kissed me on the temple while I stared at my computer screen, pretending to edit a document. I waited for him to shower before I texted my sister Lee found something, call me tomorrow. I didn't want to talk about it yet. I wanted to let it calcify into something useful. The next morning, while Mark was at his CrossFit class, I created a fake Instagram account using photos of a fitness influencer I found on Reddit. I called the account Samantha Wellness, filled it with aspirational quotes and smoothie bowls, and followed Mark's account. He followed back within 2 hours. By that afternoon, I'd slid into his DMs with a compliment about his deadlift form, which he'd posted about 3 weeks prior. This is where people will say I was asking for trouble, and maybe they're right. But I needed to know if the Emma B situation was a pattern or a one-time mistake. I told myself I was gathering data, like some kind of relationship scientist running an unethical experiment. I spent 3 weeks building a rapport with my own boyfriend, using a fake persona to test his loyalty. It should have been obvious what I was really doing, manufacturing a justification for something I'd already decided to do. The real escalation happened on a Tuesday. Mark had texted me that morning about our anniversary dinner, asking if I wanted him to make reservations at the Italian place where we'd had our first date. I said yes, thinking about how ironic it would be to celebrate 3 years while I was catfishing him from our couch. Then Samantha sent him a DM asking if he wanted to grab coffee. He replied that he was seeing someone, which should have been a relief, but then he added, though things have been weird lately. She's not herself. I read that message 15 times. She's not herself. As if he knew me well enough to know who myself actually was, as if his betrayal was somehow my personality's fault. I left work early, claiming a migraine, and went to the bar near his office where I knew he'd been with coworkers before. I wasn't planning to sleep with anyone. I just wanted to be seen, to feel desirable in a way that my manufactured experiment wasn't providing. I wanted to be the one with options. Brandon from marketing was there, celebrating a client win. We talked for 2 hours about nothing, podcasts, the bartender's terrible Manchester United tattoo, whether IPAs had gotten too hoppy. He had this way of leaning in when I spoke, like he was actually listening. When he asked if I wanted to see the roof deck at his apartment building, I said yes before I could think better of it. The sex was mechanical and forgettable, but that was almost the point. I wanted it to be meaningless. I wanted to be able to tell myself it didn't count because there was no emotion involved, just two bodies performing a transaction. Afterward, I lay on his expensive sheets and calculated how many minutes it would take me to get home before Mark did. I had 3 hours. I showered, using Brandon's Aesop soap that smelled like something Mark would never buy, and left without exchanging numbers. That night, Mark made pasta carbonara his specialty and asked if I was happy. I said yes, and I meant it in a specific, terrible way. I was happy to have evened the score. I was happy to have a secret that made me feel powerful instead of pathetic. When we went to bed, I let him touch me like everything was normal, and I faked the same orgasm I'd been faking for years, but this time it felt like performance art. The thing about catfishing your boyfriend is that you can't stop once you start. Samantha became my obsession. I checked the account during meetings, in the bathroom at restaurants, while Mark was in the shower. When she asked him deeper questions about our relationship, he answered them with a candor he'd never shown me. He told her he worried I was bored. He mentioned our sex life had become routine. He said he missed feeling sexually irresistible. I read that last message while sitting across from him at brunch, watching him cut his eggs Benedict into precise squares. I excused myself to the restroom and wrote back as Samantha, maybe you need someone who sees you that way. He replied, maybe I do. That was the moment I decided to tell him about my sexual dissatisfaction. Not because it was true, though parts of it were, but because I needed to weaponize it before he could use it against me. I needed to be the one who ended us, the one who looked him in the eye and told him he'd been inadequate. I spent the next 3 days rehearsing the speech in my head, timing it for maximum impact. I chose a Thursday evening because Mark had therapy on Friday mornings, and I wanted him to have a professional to process my cruelty. I waited until he'd poured us each a glass of wine, until the apartment felt settled and safe. Then I said we need to talk about our sex life. I've been faking it for 3 years. I've been settling, and I can't do it anymore. The specific words mattered. Settling implied I'd made a choice, that I'd chosen him despite his mediocrity. It positioned me as the one with standards, the one who'd compromised. It was a power word meant to reframe every intimate moment we'd shared into something I'd endured rather than enjoyed. His face went through 3 distinct phases: confusion, recognition of the insult, and then a strange blankness I'd never seen before. He set his wine glass down so carefully that I knew he wanted to smash it. 3 years, he repeated, like he was verifying the number. You've been pretending for 3 years. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. I'd practiced this part too. I didn't want to hurt your feelings, but I can't keep performing. The performance line was a mistake. I saw it register in his shoulders, how they squared like he was preparing for a physical fight. Mark had never raised a hand to me, but in that moment, I understood what it felt like to be hit without contact. He walked to our bedroom without speaking, and I heard drawers opening and closing with methodical precision. I stayed on the couch, sipping my wine, waiting for the confrontation I'd orchestrated. He emerged 20 minutes later with 2 duffel bags and his laptop. I'll send someone for the rest, he said, his voice flat as a closed book. You should have told me sooner, or not at all. I almost laughed. Not at all would have required a different kind of courage. But I didn't say anything. I watched him walk out and listened to his car start in the driveway. Then I opened my phone and screenshotted the final DM exchange between him and Samantha, the one where he'd agreed to meet her for drinks the following week. I posted it to my close friend's Instagram story with the caption, "Turns out the trash takes itself out." The immediate aftermath felt like a victory. My phone exploded with messages. Lee, our mutual friends, people I'd barely spoken to in years. They all wanted to know what happened, and I gave them the sanitized version. I'd been honest about my needs, and he couldn't handle it. I left out the part about Brandon. I left out the part about Samantha. I left out the part where I'd been the architect of my own humiliation. What I didn't anticipate was how quickly the narrative would spin out of my control. Mark's mother called me the next day, her voice cracking with a fury I didn't know she possessed. You told my son he was sexually inadequate and left him to find out on Instagram that you'd been cheating on him. He showed me the messages, Jenna, the real ones. My stomach dropped through the floor. What messages? Don't, she said, and hung up. The real ones turned out to be screenshots Mark had taken of his conversation with Samantha. He'd shown them to his therapist, who'd apparently told him that someone was catfishing him using stolen photos. Mark had done a reverse image search and traced the account back to my IP address. He'd known it was me for 2 days before I made my confession. He'd been waiting to see how far I'd go. The confrontation happened at my office on Monday morning. Mark walked into the lobby while I was grabbing coffee, looking exhausted but composed in the way people do when they've already grieved. He didn't raise his voice. I know about the fake account. I know you were testing me. And I know about Saturday night. My coffee cup felt suddenly too hot. Saturday night? Brandon's roommate is dadding my cousin. Small world. He pulled out his phone and showed me a photo I'd recognized, me leaving Brandon's building, wearing Mark's favorite dress, the one he'd bought me for our anniversary. The timestamp was 6:47 p.m., 2 hours before I'd told Mark I was working late. Here was the moment I could have come clean. I could have explained about Emma B., about the laptop, about feeling like I had to strike first. Instead, I said, so you were stalking me. Mark's laugh was sharp enough to cut bone. You're incredible. You create a fake woman to entrap me, sleep with someone else, then tell me I've been inadequate for 3 years, and I'm the one stalking you. He pocketed his phone. I just came to tell you that I'm filing a police report about the harassment. The fake account constitutes cyberstalking in this state. He walked away before I could respond, leaving me standing in the lobby with a cooling coffee and the distinct sensation of my life cracking open like an egg. My boss, who'd been watching from the reception desk, called me into her office an hour later. I need to understand what's happening, she said, her tone careful. Mark called our HR department this morning. The fallout was immediate and comprehensive. HR suspended me pending investigation into whether I'd used company resources for harassment. My close friend's story had been screenshot and shared in a group chat I wasn't in. Lee called, her voice shaking. Mom saw the post. She's demanding we have a family meeting. By Wednesday, I'd been formally terminated. By Friday, Lee had moved out of our shared apartment, saying she couldn't be associated with what I'd done. She left a note on the kitchen counter. You didn't just hurt him. You manufactured a reason to hurt him. That's not self-protection, it's pathology. I spent the weekend deleting social media accounts, blocking numbers, and drinking wine straight from the bottle while sitting on the floor where Mark's desk used to be. The apartment felt like a crime scene I'd staged myself. I kept trying to pinpoint where I'd lost control of the narrative, but the truth was I'd never had control. I just had the illusion of it, bought with manufactured evidence and preemptive strikes. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that the worst part hadn't happened yet. That would come the following Tuesday when Emma Brennan herself showed up at my door. She looked exactly like her photos, sharp-featured, confident, wearing a leather jacket that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Mark told me everything, she said, not waiting for an invitation. The fake account, the setup, the confession. He also told me why you did it. I found the laptop, I said, my voice rough from days of crying and not eating. I saw the messages between you two, from before. Emma's expression shifted from anger to something like pity. Those messages were from 2019. He kept the laptop because he was using it as evidence in a restraining order case against me. I stalked him for 8 months after they broke up. The explicit photos, I sent those unsolicited. The hotel plans, I booked them and told him where to be. He was documenting everything to build a case. The room tilted sideways. What? He showed me the fake account you created, Emma continued. I recognize the photos you used. They belong to a friend of mine, a fitness coach in Portland. Mark figured out it was you because of the way you phrase things. She's not herself. You wrote that exact phrase in a card you gave him last year. He remembered. I sank to the floor, my legs refusing to hold me. He knew the whole time. He wanted to see how you'd play it out, Emma said. He thought maybe if you had the chance to be honest, you would be. Instead, you slept with a coworker and told him he'd been inadequate for 3 years. She crouched down, her voice dropping. The part that's going to destroy you is that he wasn't messaging me back recently. Those notifications you saw were from me creating new accounts to contact him. He was showing them to his therapist, trying to understand why I wouldn't leave him alone. You read 2-year-old messages and assumed the worst, and when you couldn't find current infidelity, you created it yourself. The full confession, the one I owe now, is this: I didn't just settle sexually. I settled for a narrative where I was the wronged party, the one with the moral high ground, the woman who finally spoke her truth. I manufactured a betrayal so I could retaliate without guilt. I weaponized feminism and honesty and sexual empowerment until they became tools for cruelty. And when I told Mark he'd never satisfied me, I was telling the truth, just not the way he thought. He hadn't satisfied my need to be the victim, so I'd become the villain instead. The police report he filed resulted in a cease and desist order. The screenshots I posted became evidence in a harassment complaint that followed me to every job interview for 6 months. My sister stopped speaking to me entirely. Brandon, it turned out, had recorded our encounter without consent and had been showing it to people at work before HR shut that down too. I'd managed to turn myself into a case study in mutually assured destruction. I live alone now, in a studio apartment on the east side of town, where I don't have to see anyone who knew us. Mark and Emma got back together 6 months after all this happened. The irony doesn't escape me. My attempt to expose their connection became the catalyst that rekindled it. They started a podcast about online harassment and digital ethics, using our story as the opening episode. I listened to it once, huddled in my bathroom with headphones, and heard Mark describe the moment I told him I'd been settling. It was the most honest she'd ever been with me, he said. Just not about the right things. I'm telling this now because yesterday, a mutual friend sent me a photo from their engagement party. Emma's wearing a ring, Mark's laughing at something she's saying, and they look genuinely happy in a way I never understood how to be. The caption read proof that sometimes the trash takes itself out so you can find what's real. I spent last night reading through the old messages I'd sent as Samantha, marveling at how convincingly I'd performed the role of the other woman. I'd been everything I thought Mark wanted: mysterious, sexually forward, emotionally detached. I'd created the perfect trap, but I'd been the one who got caught. The person I was trying to expose didn't exist. The person I was trying to protect didn't need saving. And the person I was trying to punish was myself all along. The moral ambiguity here isn't whether Mark was innocent. He was, mostly, which is the part that makes my teeth ache. It's whether my confession about settling was technically true. I did settle. I settled for being suspicious instead of trusting. I settled for revenge instead of communication. I settled for the cheap thrill of being right over the hard work of being in love. And when I told him he'd never been enough, I was really admitting that I'd never been enough for the kind of relationship that could survive honesty. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even expect understanding. I just needed someone to know that when I said I settled, I wasn't talking about the sex. I was talking about the person I became in order to justify my own fear. Mark moved his stuff out that day because he finally saw me clearly, and I can't blame him for not liking what he saw. I'd spent 3 years building that version of myself, one small deception at a time. The confession was just the final coat of paint on a masterpiece of self-sabotage. Sometimes I think about texting him to apologize properly, but then I remember that proper apologies require understanding what you're sorry for, and I'm still not entirely sure. Am I sorry I hurt him? Yes. Am I sorry I got caught? Also yes. Am I sorry I created a fake identity to test him, then used his failure to justify my own affair? The answer depends on the day, which is probably why I don't deserve to be in his inbox. The world sees a woman who was brutally honest about her sexual needs and got punished for it. Mark sees a woman who manufactured a crisis to mask her own infidelity. I see someone who got so addicted to preemptive strikes that she forgot what she was defending. All three are true, and none of them capture the whole story. That's the problem with confessions. They're never complete, never honest in the way we pretend they are. Mine was just another performance, and Mark was the only one smart enough to recognize the stage directions. He moved out because he understood something I didn't. That settling isn't about accepting less than you deserve. It's about convincing yourself you deserve less than you have. And once you've done that, there's no amount of honesty that can save you.